to see if I could find any studies on this, maybe you know some. But, where's the experts? Thank you. But anecdotally, it seems to us over the many, many years we've been doing this, that if you have a piece of food, a kind of food that you want your animal to eat for whatever reason, but they're not all that keen on it, the best thing you can do is put it in a not too difficult enrichment device, because if they do some work for it, suddenly it's more valuable, and they'll often eat it. And we've done this with primates, livestock, rodents, whatever, birds, a lot of birds. Yeah, I don't know. Let's do that. Who's Jared? Let's do that. Okay.
Am I Gal's way?
I have a question once you guys are done with your technology.
Shoot, go for it.
So, could you perhaps speak to the question of how often you think these things should be changed up? Like yesterday we covered a lot of enrichment that had to do with the animal's habitat and furnishings, you know, a lot of the perching, a lot of the substrate sort of thing, types of things.
Right.
You know, what's your thoughts, recommendations? I mean, I get that on a species by species and maybe individual by individual, there's going to be variation, but do you have any general rule of thumb that you like to see in terms of how frequent parts or all are changed out? And then the same thing with the feeding strategies. Do you have any recommendations of how often those types of things should be changed? Because I know that for a lot of our species we do use different feeding strategies, but I think in many cases we probably are using the same feeding strategies for that species very regularly.
Let me answer the last one first, and I may forget the other two. So somebody remind me. Food enrichment to me, first of all, my dream is to, before I die, go to a zoo and see no dishes, okay, and still have animals eating. Food enrichment to me should, all of the food the animal gets, ideally, modulo medical issues, should be either in a training or an enrichment program, as far as I'm concerned, if at all possible. Yes, if you're using devices, you, in my opinion, you could pretty much use them over and over and over and over and over again because they have food in it. So the animal's still going to work it to get their food. The downside with doing that frequently with the same device is that they become very proficient. And I'll show you an example of different levels of proficiency in this next talk. But for example, I think Margaret
Komodo even. I mean, he became very proficient at using that tube feeder.
Yes.
So same
Very
device,
quickly.
but presented differently.
Yeah. And
Well, I like the duct tape on the boomer ball.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like
I mean, we got plenty of animals that just go straight to the hole and then.
yeah, and I mean, we started years ago with the boomer ball with a hole in it for the big giant pandas, and they had to walk around this ball and get the food out. But not too long later, a few months later, the female would sit on the ground and just go like this.
One of our bears would lay on her back and just
Yeah,
take
exactly.
it into her mouth.
So depending on what your goal is, that may not be meeting your goal any longer. And so then that just puts the onus back on you to make sure that you're still meeting your goal. Okay, and that means you have to make it more difficult or change it up somehow. So the more different kinds of devices that you have that elicit different activities, different interactions, different behaviors, the less frequency you give any one gift, okay? A higher latency between giving the same one over and over again, and the less chance they have to become proficient. Okay? So I do, when I was doing scheduling, I would schedule food enrichment we're not talking about scheduling this straightforward. But in the sense of, you know, give one of these kinds of feeders and give one of those kinds of feeders, just to make sure it gets changed up a lot.
And that it doesn't look the same, or look different, but function the same.
Yes.
So really the function, not the.
The function and the behavior are the key elements, not what it looks like to us. I don't know. I'm still trying to remember the rest of the questions.
Well, they're actually the
So
same
yes,
question, just one about feeding devices and one about habitats.
So the other kinds of enrichment, or the non-food enrichment, those other 4 categories. So the answer is it depends. But, so back in the day, we used to always say enrichment has to be novel. I'm sure you've heard that and read 20-year-old papers on that. I think my name's on one of them. I don't say that anymore, because by category, it's going to make a difference on the effect of novelty. Some scent enrichment, sensory enrichment, may only be of interest if it's novel, okay? But other things, like the scratching bushes you were showing yesterday and stuff, they're being used out for body maintenance and comfort over and over and over again. So I think novelty plays a role sometimes, but not as much as we like to think. Now certainly,
It really goes back to your goals.
yes, and when you're talking about something like furniture in the enclosure, changing things up for a lot of species is good on not a regular basis, but not infrequently. However, major changes, maybe not so much, okay? So that's why I said, I think we were talking about how nice it is to have eye hooks kind of everywhere, so you can say, well, this dynamic branch is anchored over here, so I'm just going to move it here. You know, and it stays like that for a month or whatever. So that one you kind of play by ear. For carnivores, which is where most of my experience is, ideally, I think, don't panic. I think that for non-food enrichment, in general, carnivores should get enrichment at least once a day. Okay? And here, for carnivores, my latency was once a month. So if I give this today, I can't give it until the 15th of next month.
For
Okay?
every object, for every single type of thing?
Yeah. Well, again, depending on your goal and depending on how, this is my rule of thumb, okay? Scents was different. I had my latency, they could get a scent every week, but not the same scent. It had to be once a month. This was by the seat of my pants, this is kind of what it seems like to me, because I've worked with a lot of carnivores and they seem to keep interested if I don't give it any more often than that. There was actually a study done with tigers a few years ago that verified that by the 3rd week, if the tiger got the same, each of the 4 enrichments they tried, if they got them once a week, by the 3rd week, their interest went way down.
And that's just for non-food.
And that's for non-food. That's why I separated them in my answer, right? Food's different, they'll use it, they'll just become more proficient and make your life a living hell. Or non-food, just to keep your interest up. So I really think that's up to the teams that work with the animals. The primate guys get together and say, well, the gibbons, they don't get familiar with it too quick, they'll keep using it, they have high interest, whatever. Okay, we can give it once every 2 weeks, or whatever it is. And when I do the documentation and the scheduling, I actually list the categories that each item meets, the goals that we've come up with the idea for, and the latency, how often can I do it. Things like mirrors for carnivores, 6 weeks minimum, once every 6 weeks minimum. Otherwise, it's just, they're like, yeah, I know that thing is nothing, So, not a straightforward, simple answer, but I think that you'll work that out for your own animals and your own sections. Does that make sense? Okay, so Margaret got through the 5 categories, yay! And before she goes on to planning, I just want to reinforce how important it is to think of enrichment for individuals rather than populations or species. Okay, she's going to talk about a lot of species stuff. And she did talk yesterday about a lot of individual stuff. These are some of the different things that I find when I'm doing my initial research, which she's going to talk about in a minute, on my species and individual. Okay? And these are some of the things that really seem to play a role in the enrichment we wind up putting in our programs. Sorry. When I use the word plan, enrichment plan, I mean for the animal. Okay? When I say enrichment program, it's the more global section program or institution program or something like that, okay? So I just want to walk you through real quick these guys. Actually, because I had to have this translated, I just left the words in so I don't even have to say them. okay? This was her favorite enrichment, getting a hose. She wasn't getting sprayed, the hose was put in the same place, and if she wanted to come over, she did, which she always did. But she wasn't being sprayed, okay? But if she had the history of being shifted by hitting her with a high power hose every night, right, probably wouldn't be so enriching for her, at least not initially. This little lady, you remember her, came out of Bear Bile Farm. She had been in a smaller place than this where she really couldn't walk around, but she could move around. And then they had recently moved her into this enclosure, so we weren't expecting her to run up the feeding pole or anything like that because she had no ability to do anything like that. So this is how we get her started. You start at their level. Just find a log that she found. There's nothing on it. She just never had anything she could interact with like that before, and it had that nice handle. I was so excited when I found this log in the woods.
You're in what?
You remember? I was like, oh my God, I have the perfect one. But she really used it exactly how we thought. And that's how she's going to initially build up her upper body strength in her legs. So this is an example of how I can get in trouble. This enrichment was just an entire bale of alfalfa with 16 fully war biscuits in it. I was taking research data. I think it was about 20 minutes that I had counted that he had found all 16 bickies. But because of the dust or whatever, it was like 3.5 hours he did this. He was supposed to go in so the keepers could go home, and he didn't do. They couldn't get him to go in away from his pile. And so they had to pay some overtime that night. But he agreed. Their diet, we run into this a lot. I can't do enrichment because the nutritionist won't let me give raisins or honey, or I've used my peanut butter quota or whatever. I hope you got from Margaret's talk that we really believe in using their daily diet for enrichment. Treats are fine if they're added to it, if it's something that they can get periodically. Great, just make sure they're working off the calories to get those treats. Don't just pour some honey on the ground and let them have it. They're going to have to do some serious work for honey. Okay? So in this case, the panda's diet was very tightly controlled, and they love fruitsicles, and San Diego gets hot. So what we would do is we would take those juice and milk cartons, half-gallon wax cartons, and we all saved them and washed them out and brought them in, and they would make fruitsicles in them, and they had either carrots or apple, because that was the only diet they were allowed to have, fruit and veg. And we just would write on the outside. I love these things because they go in the freezer. You know, they stack up really nice. And once they're frozen, you can even tip them over and pile them up if you want to. And we would just marker on the outside 1 apple, or half apple, half carrot, whatever was in it. And then on the day when the keeper goes to pull that one out, 1 apple, okay, apple comes out of the diet, fruitcicle goes in. Okay? And then that apple's going to get used to making new fruitcicle. So we never went off diet at all. You can find ways to try this stuff. We like to say every animal in the zoo has a job. Well, they have a wristwatch and a job. And this is just kind of an example I explained. This is a lot of this stuff's going to be obvious to you guys, and I kind of know that. But I don't know you well, so we just decided to kind of cover everything. The general way I look at jobs, this is
Oh, it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't show up on the screen. Do you want me to, do you want me to ban it?
so I tend to think of this as a continuum. They're going from what I call conservation animals all the way up to ambassador animals. So the cheetah, who's going to be, you know, going around to the parties with all the ladies in fur coats that you want to give money, he's going to have social, people-oriented enrichment as a major part of his development, as a youngster and growing up and continuing, right? Because you don't want the lady in the party to be the first human he sees and interacts with. On the other hand, California condors never get to see a human until they're flying out in the wild and turn around and look over their shoulder. Okay, so it really depends on what the purpose of the animal is going to drive your enrichment program. Margaret talked about this yesterday. We old mammals have special needs. I really sympathize with this. I used to go camping and just sleep on the ground. I can't do that anymore. And elevation is a good point. This lynx was really easy for him to get up, really old guy. This is in the pouring rain, and he came out and just sat right on it, right in front of the visitors. I can show you 50 pictures like this, okay, of animals mostly carnivores we do this for on these beds. And you want the public to see them? Put a table bed there. And this old girl could not, she was so arthritic, she really should have probably been euthanized. But this institution didn't do that. And so we gave her this, all she had to do was step onto it, barely out of the enclosure, and let her in, and she's on it, okay? Didn't care about her food or anything. I swear to God, they turn around and look at you and go, thank you. And as an old mammal, I appreciate that. Certain times of year, if you're gonna have to deal with all these testosterone crazy things going on, the best thing you can do is just distract that aggression. Give them something to beat up that's not you. Okay? This is just a pet peeve of mine. I never take out animals that have preorbital glands. I'm sure you guys know what those are for. Right there for marking territory. You know that, right? And they do it by walking up and putting a little stick, putting their orbital gland on a little stick and rolling their head around and then pulling off of it. And there's that really nasty, usually black, really stinky stuff on the end. And I see these animals, even in the States, in enclosures with mesh fence, or no fence because there's some weird moat, and beautiful pasture. And maybe one elm tree or something for shade. Where are they gonna mark? 6 weeks out of the year, that guy has got testosterone screaming at him, "Mark my territory!" And there's nowhere to mark, okay? So what I see, and it really hurts me, is I see them rubbing their faces on the tree trunk or on the mesh fence, because they have no choice, okay? It's an easy fix. Take a bunch of sticks and throw them in the enclosure. I don't even care if they're a pie. Just give them something to do that behavioral need. Testosterone is a real slave driver. It doesn't understand you can't do this now. Boys. And then gender plays a role, especially with mammals. Just for some reason, boy mammals seem to need to beat things up more than girl mammals do. You know? And so we give them things to beat them. Interestingly, in answer to your question, Colleen, the goal here is to offer them an opportunity to displace aggression. Not against their cage mates, not against you, but against something that we don't care that they aggress against. So is this an enrichment that I only offer once a month? No, it's in there all the time. Because the goal isn't novelty. The goal is when you need to beat something up, I really want you to have something to beat up. Okay? I hope they're starting to understand why I think goals are so important. It's just fun. No. When you get to what's going on with social stuff, it's really interesting to me, not being a primate person, I'm not the best hierarchy expert, okay? But when you give enrichment to a group of animals, people always ask me, how many things do I give? I have 7 monkeys, how many do I give? And the answer is it depends. And one of the things it depends upon is how strong your social hierarchy is. Does everybody know that Joe is the boss and I'm next, right? Sorry, does everybody know that Colleen is the boss and Adam's next? Or is there some contention still going on, okay? If there's some contention, you're just giving them a reason to fight. You're just suddenly making it worth my time to start thinking about maybe Colleen really doesn't need to be the boss. Maybe I want to be, okay? And these guys are, well, experts disagree. These guys are either fighting over a den or they're having sex. I'm not sure which. I've shown this to
blurry line.
It is with cuttlefish. It's a blurry line, and I've showed this to some experts. Yes.
Would you include in that if you've got a very large space, giving lots of, enough items for each individual plus some,
Yes.
but also the ease of access to those items?
Yes, and I would put the preferred items either in a more difficult place to access or a more private place or both, so that the dominant animal goes there and stays there while everybody else gets to do other stuff. Okay? Okay. But if you have a strong hierarchy, I don't think your video played, so I'm going to let this go. I was just going to refer to it. This is the male he has 6 females in the group. Mealworms, big favorite, don't get very often. 1 mare. Why? Because everybody knows Ishan's the boss. we did put it up, so he has to climb up the fence to get to it, and all the girls are sitting around below. Interestingly, he can work, and he gets almost no worms because they fall altitude through the mesh and down to the ground outside, and the girls are getting that. But eventually he gets annoyed and he walks away, but he walks away. Dominant female goes up, does the same thing, pretty soon realizes, hang on, I was getting more of those down there. I'm going back down there, the next female, and we literally watch them go through the progression of all 7 animals, okay?
And I feel like that particular approach of the kind of fewer items than animals is really a macaque, almost macaque-specific approach.
Really?
Yeah, not even applicable to other primates. It's highly effective with macaques.
Well, then let's look at this one.
Are you gonna prove me wrong?
Well, I'm going into carnivore world, so yeah, you're wrong.
I guess I was thinking monkeys. I was thinking monkeys, like, when you have these strong, it was always, because I didn't work that much with macaques, it was like, well, give more than you have animals. And then when I started working more with macaques, oh no, we give fewer.
Okay.
And certainly vary what's in them, like you have mealworms, super valuable, then you could have other things that are less valuable.
Right.
So that the dominant animal
Gets busy with the
he
mealworms.
gets busy with the good stuff, he gets to be all powerful over that, but everybody else does have an opportunity
And
if stuff's not falling out.
Yeah, so I don't know. I never really thought about, because I'm not in the primate world, I never really thought about that only works with some species, but I guess I could imagine it would, like gibbons and stuff probably don't have that kind of a, they're pairs, right? So they don't really have that kind of a hierarchy. So yeah.
So Margaret, I had never really heard or seen that done, give less than you have animals. And I hear you're saying it's really specific. So the benefit of that is what you're saying is that it keeps the dominant busy, but so you still give something lesser value to the lowers?
Well, in this case, and with a lot of other macaques, it'll seem like the dominant is super busy, and then there's all this stuff on the ground, because they're little piglets.
Right, they're
messy,
dropping in.
and then everybody else is getting that. So everybody does have an opportunity.
Okay.
They're not just sitting in the corner feeling all dejected. But our approach was always give more than, if you have 10 animals, give 15 things and spread them around. But then what you see is this dominant moving
Moving
from
from
place to
thing to
place, and saying, that one's mine, now that one's mine, now that one's mine. And so continually asserting himself rather than settling in and engaging with the device that everybody else does need to have some kind of opportunity.
But so this is a way for him to assert his dominance. I just always have had, again, not a primate person, but I've always just had a sense of this actually strengthens the hierarchy because nobody's challenging him over it. And so he's now displaying yet again that I'm the boss and you all get my leftovers.
And it asserting and reaffirming his dominance could also be helpful if there's changes in the hierarchy, or you're just introducing animals. It can be a way to say, yep, you're the boss. And so there's less fighting to establish it, or fighting over broadly distributed items. So it's kind of a different way of thinking about it, because I always came from the approach of, give way more, fill it up.
Well, that was the traditional way.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of when we were talking about cooperative feeding and how you don't want to sneak food
Right.
Exactly.
to the lesser animals, so just accepting the dominant, it
Exactly.
sounds like the same thing,
Yeah.
basically,
I
but
should have a
it-
treat for saying that, because I was thinking of that. I wasn't going to say training stuff.
So this is a really old video, but it's still a good one. In this case, they have a pride of lions. The male's obviously dominant. You'll see that in a minute. So they let everybody else out, the younger males and the females, first to have this carcass, which they don't get very often, or didn't. And so you'll see that, and then you'll see when the male comes out. Different story. Or maybe not.
Here, the little.
Yeah, the problem is sometimes when it's on the screen, I can't get
You
it
have
to,
to go back
I
to
can't
it,
line it
yeah.
up. There we go. So here's your subordinates. Everybody's fine, everybody's in there, most everybody. And here's the dominant. No problem. Okay, everybody knows, it's very clear, it's not a monkey.
Where is this?
It's actually Sacramento. But it's
Oh.
93.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But it really, it shows the effect, okay?
Is Sacramento Zoo?
I was like, they
Yes, ma'am. Back in the day, when Lee was there, when Lee was there.
When did they move to the little grotto then?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've only been there once.
In 1993.
No. Lee gave me that video.
Huh.
I'm like, yeah, where's
They ain't the Sacramento Zoo I've ever been to. That is very impressive.
Okay, so wherever you are in the social hierarchy, the animal that you're working on can really play a difference in how your enrichment goes. So we talk about giving choices, right? And everybody always says, oh, great, Valerie, what should I give? What choices do I give my animal? On the listserv. What do I give my feline, whatever? My response is, well, unless I'm really trying hard not to be snippy, my response always is, don't ask me, ask your animals. I can give you lots of suggestions, but really, they're the ones who are going to be using this, and they're the ones you should ask. Sadly, we can't do it that way, so we do choice tests. All right? So, for example, if all y'all, you like that?
Yeah.
Did that just for Margaret.
Oh, yeah.
If you came in this room and you found these 4 seating devices here, many of them, how many of you would sit in the director chair? Okay. How many in this chair? Seriously? How many in this chair?
Pretty good one.
And this one. Okay. So, why this one, Margaret?
It's just comfy, I like it, yeah, armrests.
I did do this.
Well, I have aspirations of grandeur.
I did do this for 60 zoo directors in India and everyone because their title was on it, but usually there's only 1 or 2, yeah. No one picked that one. How about this one? Why? Just shout it out.
Good.
It's cushiony, it's got
Cushiony.
armrests.
It's good back support.
It has wheels.
Comfortable and moves around. And it has this, that's my favorite part.
It's one, it's solo, if you don't want to share.
If you're feeling a little antisocial, okay. I'm sorry.
I said it's the softest thing that's not a couch, yeah, if you don't want to sit with everybody.
Okay. And this one, you guys?
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Can I just say that makes us feel wonderful?
You have choice between sitting and laying down?
Okay.
It can be social.
It can be social. Usually make a crack about that, but I'll let that one go.
Sit on the back.
Ooh, I am not, oh, there's a, I haven't heard that one before.
There were no pillows, extra pillows for the couch, which I need, so I don't have any couch.
And is that, you pick this?
Because of back support, yeah.
Yeah. So I picked this too, and everybody knows about my bum, ankle, leg, because usually I tell people. But that's not why I picked that. I have a really good reason for picking that. And at this point in our normal workshop, people will have been watching me stand up front for a long time. And I use this to demonstrate how you can know your animals really well, and you should be trained to look for cues as to what's going on with them, but you don't know everything. You never know everything, okay? The reason I picked this is that I was born with a really bad lower back, all right? And if I sit in this or this, and I don't have a chiropractor in my pocket, it's a good 3 days before I can move without pain. Just a couple hours will do that to me. I can do about 2 hours in this chair, what are you saying?
Because of the back.
Because of the back.
It depends on where the slats are.
I can do about 2 hours in that chair. And that's my second pick. Yeah. Okay, so you see me mucking around and in pain and all that, you always think it's my leg, because that's the obvious thing, everybody knows what I'm, okay? But actually, I have more trouble with my back than my leg. So, there you go. Alrighty, so, most people wanted this. Colleen suddenly comes into a bunch of money and says, oh, screw the animals, let's redo our room. Because that sounds like her. No, I'm kidding. So I have all this money, I'm going to redo the room. Is this what it's going to look like? Because that's what... Ready?
Hopefully.
Seriously, yes or no?
Yes.
No.
No is the correct answer. There's not always a correct answer in this case, there is, for two reasons, okay? One, power and choice. Power and choice, there's no longer any choice, okay? Maybe you want to sit here today, but maybe you and the person you're sitting with had a fight last night. You don't want to sit with him or her anymore. You know? That's going to be a little bit of a problem, all right? Or maybe the sun is glaring on it, coming in today really strong. You don't want to sit on the upholstery. I don't know. For whatever reason, you may not want to sit on this day after day, okay? There's no choice left. And then the other reason is, it was only about 50 or 60% of you that wanted to sit there. What about the rest of us? Like, we're screwed. Like, I never thought about sitting on the back. I would try that. But otherwise, I would be on the floor up against a wall. And I've actually done that in places where people were very embarrassed to see me do that, because otherwise I'm in a lot of pain. And I'm like, I don't care, I'm old, I don't care what you think of me. I'm not gonna hurt if I have to. Okay, so it should look more like this. Just keep some options in there. Okay, nobody picked the wooden chair, so there you go.
It's like you knew that was going to be said.
I was like, yes, I have never done this before. Actually, we usually have like one or two for each of those. Right, so a preference test is you just give two or more options at the same time and watch and see what the animals do with it. Just remember, because they have a preference, even if they go to the same thing every time you do this, don't just assume that's exactly what they need all the time. You still need to give them options. So think about this when you're looking at the substrates in your enclosure. Yeah, they got nice grass, but do they have anything else? Okay? So the last little bit I want to talk about, because this comes up a lot, is there's two situations that happen where it becomes very difficult. People don't understand, how do I think about the individual animal when I have either a whole lot of animals I have to take care of, back to show areas or sanctuaries, or areas we run into, sanctuaries with 300 orangutans, or a show area with 100 parrots, okay? How do I do individual planning for all those animals and get them something every day? And then the other situation is when you have a large enclosure with lots of different species and many, many individuals in it. Okay, so I just want to give you examples of dealing with both of those scenarios. So let's say you have something like this, where you have those 100 parrots and there's 1 to 3 per cage, and so you've got 4 rows of 25 cages. Okay? On the schedule, today, row A is going to get kerplunk feeders, row B is going to get a shaker box, row C is going to get, I don't know, a PVC tube rolling device, right? That's how you do your schedule. So you don't have to have 100 kerplunk feeders. You only need 25, okay? But that's for all the parrots, okay? So what we do is we plan for parrots, or in that case cockatoos, okay? And we say, hey, we're going to make this kerplunk feeder. And we're going to test it out, because Margaret's going to walk you through that next. And we find that 19 of the 25 parrots in row A happen to be very proficient with kerplunk feeders. They're perfectly happy to pull lots of sticks out to get that one walnut or whatever they're after. All right? So we make that kind of difficult for them, or the better word is challenging. And so the holes are going to be smaller, sticks are going to fit a little tighter, they're going to be completely horizontal, so there's no help from gravity. Maybe the sticks will even be longer, so they have to pull them a lot more to get them out. But these 19 birds can handle that. Okay? But now let's say there's 5 birds that can't. They get the concept and they can do it, but they can't really do it if it's too challenging. This is not a great example because there's a lot of sticks in it, but it's the only picture I could find I have with the angled sticks. So sticks are going to be shorter, the holes are going to be larger, and they're going to be angled, so if they just get it moving, they'll just fall. Okay? And that's the kind of thing you do to teach them how to use the kerplunk to start with. And then we've got one guy left who's got a damaged beak, and I'm amazed at how many parrots I see in captivity in the developing countries where their beak is split in half and it's like hanging off to the side. It's just like, oh my God. But we run into this a lot. So we're going to give them a device that they have to use their feet to get the food out. Okay? Or in this case, a lot of really soft food kebab that they can work their way through with the beak. Okay? So what you do is you plan for everybody. You plan for citizens. And then you just see which individuals dropped out. Okay, and this works for everybody but that guy, okay? And so for that guy, we need to come up with something individual. Does that make sense?
Let's say you have the really proficient in with the less proficient, and you start seeing the proficient one bullying off. How do you make time for those ones? How do you make that safe space? What's coming?
Again. In this case, I would do a lot of the general things we talked about before. Put the preferred food in the difficult one. Put up partial visual barriers or screenings that Margaret talked about yesterday. That's something we do a lot. She didn't get to talk about it. We do a lot with feeding stations. So she showed you a picture, you maybe didn't notice it, of a macaque with a big banana leaf in front of him. There's 8 macaques in the enclosure, and we just hung up these banana leaves, and the food was positioned behind the banana leaf. So if I'm sitting here, the banana leaf in front of me, I can't see what you're doing behind your banana leaf or you're doing behind your banana leaf. Okay, so those visual barriers can be really, really important. Because it's like, oh yeah, I don't know what they're doing, but I got this food. Okay, so you set that up. If you have, there's a lot of different really tricky things you can do if you have to. You can go crazy, like putting RFDs in them, subcutaneous, so that the other bird can't get access to his feeder. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do, but usually if you just put the preferred items for the dominant animal and you put up screening, that usually is enough.
What's an RFD?
Sorry, RFID, radio frequency something device. Identification device, yeah. Yeah.
Is that where, like, when they run into it, it recognizes their little chip and it shuts?
Exactly. Exactly. I have one from one of my old lady cats. Her litter box is in a big glass box that reads the chip on her collar, because the 2 boys go in her box and then she just goes in the house. So now she's the only one who can access her litter box, and the boys have their own litter box, and everybody's happy, including me.
You can do it for dog owners too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And let me know if you're gonna talk about this already, but our big problem on string 1 is that what's giraffe. So it's great for the giraffe, like small holes for their tongues is a death trap for the eland with their horns. So a huge problem we have is that we have a mixed species exhibit, and the enrichment that's usually safe for one species is not safe for the other. So it just means we're very limited. So what we have up high, well yeah, I mean that's what we do, but things on the ground are tripping hazards for the giraffe, and that's where the eland are. So we have lots of
Do
issues.
you have challenge giraffe?
With,
Yeah.
Seriously?
well, we have
Less so
soundness
now.
problems, and the bull chases the males when there's estrus, and there's chasing, and we've had falls before. And so it's very particular, and we enrich those species, but it's just very limiting because
Right.
you know.
And we have geese.
And we have geese that are just
Can we
there.
So, okay, so the issues you're raising are safety issues, which
Yeah.
we will talk about later. But before we
Okay.
do that, we're going to talk about the planning chart. And one of the things that Margaret's going to touch on is identifying your criteria after you do your brainstorming. And that's where that would come into play.
Perfect.
Okay?
Okay.
So don't let us stop today without coming back to that, okay? Okay, so that one all makes sense to everybody? How you're just looking for the individuals to fall out. Okay. Very similar here, we had about, I don't even know how many ungulates were there, about 60. There were 3 species, and they were different heights. And then, of course, the male black bucks had these long horns. So how are we going to get their food distributed around the enclosure to them? Because everything went into 2 basically hay racks, eating their pellets and stuff in the back of the enclosure. And there was, as you might imagine, a lot of, not violent aggression, but a lot of displacement and minor aggression typically, because they're only fed once a day. So how do we distribute the food around? So the first thing we do is come up with a lot of different designs. Okay, at this point, they'd never had anything, so we didn't know what was going to be hard for them, what was going to be interesting for them, blah, blah, blah. So we just came up with tons of different designs.
I love the look on his face.
Wait, what? And it's just a hay ball. We shoved carrots in the tree here, he's about to get out. We had these wispy sandwich board things for them, browse for them to chew on. We had this pellet feeder that has little holes in it, stuffed with straw to keep it from falling out the ends, because most of the countries I work in, we can't get end caps for PVC. And there's a board down here to catch the pellets so they're not eating it off the dirt. There was lots and lots of other things around, but lots of different ideas, okay? And so now you gotta watch and see who's proficient. And this little girl, she really knocked my socks off. Everybody else was like, I don't know what to do with this pellet thing, they gotta go in a little bit. She pulled the straw out and look at her just guzzling a bucket full of pellet down. You know?
It's all falling on the ground.
Most of it's going in her throat, man. All those nice
I think she'd like
holes. So clearly she's falling out from the group. We're gonna have to do something different for her, right? Because this isn't gonna work. So, and then the third strategy is to just separate everybody as much as you can. One idea for doing that is these willow balls, okay, or whatever flexible material you have to work with. And people are, oh my God, he's gonna get his hoof cut. No, it's a willow ball. It'll just eat it off his hoof, if nothing else. They're flexible, they come right off. This is really nice. Are these Neola or Bushbuck?
No.
I think they're Neolas. This is really nice because they had 2 hay racks in the really back of the enclosure, and they wanted the public to see them more. So you can see that we just put them all around, and it groups it really nice, and it makes it a lot easier to clean. So yeah, big hit with the deer and the puppy. All right, so, sorry? So basically, we just want to make sure you understand that, just like we stressed with welfare last time, enrichment is also individual oriented, okay? And the choice tests are a really good way, preference testing, to find out what they like. But regardless, you need to give them lots of options and make sure that every individual in the enclosure is getting some. Margaret already told you this is my favorite enrichment, although it was big enough that it's like this. This is a pile for a bongo. Every hoofstock I've ever given, like antelope or deer or whatever, I've ever given a substrate pile to has done similar stuff with it, okay? But for bongo, this is especially important. Anybody know why? Bingo. Know your animal. The mainstay of their diet is roots. How do they get roots? They dig for it. How do they dig for it? They use their horns as well as the hips. Okay? And not a lot of us do that. So know your animal. Understand that when you're looking at your weight of categories, this is going to be heavier weighted for a bongo than it is going to be for a bushbuck. Okay?
Did I see lunch come in?
Yeah.
Shall we go and get lunch now?
Questions?
Yeah, questions? And then I just want to say, again, it's get your lunch and sit down. And if you want to sign up, I'll give you the rules right before we stand up.
So I was in one of my classes, we gave like lobsters different choices of substrate, but we didn't know a lot about lobsters. So like say you're somewhere where you can't get as many things, or you don't know a lot about the animal, how do you know you're picking the right stuff? Because like my professor said, what if you think you're picking the right thing, but you're choosing between glass and rocks? Like,
Exactly.
neither of those are fun.
And actually, that's why people say they don't want to give choice, they don't recommend choice tests anymore. But these are academics who are stuck in a rut. Okay, you're going to give them 2 today, you give them 2 different ones tomorrow. 2 different ones. Academics don't always understand how we apply things, okay? I'm kind of making a joke.